Hey everyone, Rascally Rasmus here. Today I have another 10 Enshrouded tips and tricks for you, but before we get into that, I just want to thank you so much for all the likes, all the comments, all the support on my previous Enshrouded video. I really appreciate it. At the end of this video, we're also going to be going over some tips from the comments, as we always do. So with that, let's just get straight into the tips. The first tip is to remember to pet your pets, because petting your pets will give you 25 health for 30 minutes, and you can do this every time you're about to leave your base, so just always do that. Also with the new patch, as you can see here, the NPCs have now started roaming around, and this can be quite a nuisance. And so it took me a little while to realize, but if you use your summoning staff, you can actually, by pressing R while hovering the NPC you want to do it, you can actually change their leash range, so you can change it all the way from 0 to 50 meters. So at 0 meters, they will no longer be moving around. I personally do like them moving around because I think it adds to immersion, but if so, I think it's very helpful to just always be carrying your summoning staff around, and whenever you need them, just summon them instead of bothering spending time looking for them, because frankly, it's quite annoying trying to find them, because especially when they get stuck like the alchemist here, I would not think to go here to look for my alchemist. Next up is something that took me a while to realize, but these flowers that shoot projectiles at you, you can entirely block their projectiles by just holding your shield up. So yeah, it took me way too long to realize, so just wanted to call that out. I'd also strongly recommend that you very early on practice parrying, because parrying is super powerful. Not only does it negate all damage taken if you time it correctly, but it will also fill the enemy stun bar quite significantly. And so, yeah, practice parrying. To parry, you basically just need to start blocking right before an enemy attack would hit like that. And I'm probably going to miss it a bunch now because I'm on camera, but you get the point. Right before the enemy attack hit, you just parry, and yeah, strongly recommend practicing that. Next, I want to talk a bit about some stats I was confused about early on in the game. Like, for instance, you have Marksman, which says it increases range damage dealt by 10%, or damage dealt by ranged weapons by 10%. And this does not include wands or staffs, despite what you may think based on the wording. In the skill tree, anything that says range damage is only bows, anything that says magic damage is only wands and staffs, and anything that says melee damage is, yeah, only melee weapons. Aside from that, I was also quite confused about Overcharge on wands, which you can see here, 11% Overcharge. This essentially means it says it on the wand as well, but it was quite confusing to me because I was trying to like hold left click and stuff like that. But it's essentially just a chance to deal extra damage, sort of like a critical hit. So you don't really need to think about Overcharge too much, just know that it's a chance to deal extra damage. Similarly, on this bow, you have this Head Seeker saying Skillshots restore 5 stamina. Skillshots are essentially just any shot to a weak point, so typically headshots. I was also a little confused about that. Then you have stuff like Backstab damage is literally just any damage dealt from behind, as you might have noticed, deals as a baseline 10% more damage. There are talents that you can take that will multiply that damage further, but it's something to be aware of. Whereas sneak damage or sneak attack damage is based on the like sneak attack here, where you have to sneak up on enemies and press E to trigger it, and then you deal like 10 times the normal damage. So those are two different things. Also, on shields, I was pretty confused about what does block value mean versus what does parry power mean. Block value is essentially subtracted from the stamina cost to blocking. So more block means that you also will lose less stamina on blocking. So this means that if you're a parry god and always hits your parries like every single time, then technically block is a completely useless stat. Obviously, I assume that's not the case for most players, so block is pretty good to have. And I was also a little confused about what parry power meant, but the parry power is just how much the enemy stun bar is filled whenever you parry. And lastly, I just want to talk a bit about resistances. Resistance essentially just means that that damage type is reduced by 1 point of damage per point of resistance you have. So if you have 61 physical resistance, then all physical damage is reduced by 61 whenever you're hit. So if an enemy deals 100 damage, then it's 100 minus 61, 39 damage taken. Next, I also want to talk a bit about timing your attacks or power attacking. For both daggers and other two-handed weapons, when you hit, you will normally go like this with this one, for instance. But if you do a little pause between hits, it will instead do a like over-the-head slam, followed by an even bigger over-the-head slam if you then again take a break with a little, or time it correctly. And these overhead slams deal quite a bit more damage than the regular hit. So there is something to doing this, and I had no idea this was in the game till I just randomly noticed. The same goes for daggers. You can normally, it will just attack like this, but if you do a little bit of a pause in between, it'll do an overhead strike. And this overhead strike will hit with both daggers, and it also seems to be able to hit multiple enemies, so it can be pretty good, whereas daggers are usually pretty weak at AoE, I feel. This can help a little bit with that. I also want to recommend that you find the Bard as early on as you can. The Bard is found in the Blackmire, up in the northwestern corner, because the Bard will allow you to craft a bigger back size. Currently I have only unlocked the medium backpack, but you'll also unlock the larger backpack from the Bard. And also the Bard will allow you to craft musical instruments, which will increase your comfort when playing them. So they can further extend your comfort buff. And yeah, then it's just cozy as well with the musical instruments. I also want to talk a bit about inventory management. I have not unlocked the bigger chests yet, or I have unlocked them, but I haven't crafted them. But I find it helpful to sort of categorize my things. So I have all my materials over here, I have all my food, consumables over here, and I have all my weapons and some arrows and stuff over here, building materials. So when I come back to my base, I usually just go over and open all my resource ones and hold Shift R and just quickly go through them all. Because Shift R will auto stack directly into existing stacks. So I think that can be pretty helpful. So it's worth noting that even though you can't lock anything in your inventory, anything on your hotbars will not auto stack. So if there's anything you don't want to accidentally stack, then just make sure you keep it on one of your 2 action bars, hotbars. In addition to my tip about crafting better torches in my last Enshrouded video, I also just want to point out that if you interact with a workbench or anything else that repairs, it will also repair your torch, which is very helpful. Since I play without any durability, it wasn't immediately obvious to me that this was how it worked, but yeah, just wanted to call that out. It also took me too long to realize, but if you get stuck somewhere, remember that you can terraform in this game, so pull out your pickaxe and start digging. And this naturally also works for if you want to scale a certain mountainside or something. If you have the time and patience, you can essentially just start digging a staircase into the mountainside. And you can skip quite a bit of stuff you might not want to do this way. So yeah, something to keep in mind. It can be a little finicky, but play around with the terraforming. It's really fun and it's really cool. But my last tip before we get into all the tips from all of you is that the Necromancer skill will benefit everyone in your game. So as long as one person has it, this will be active for everyone. So whenever anyone with a magic weapon kills an enemy, there's a 10% chance to summon a friendly Skull Companion. It should be noted though that these Skull Companions will be tied to the person who has the skill point. So if someone else kills an enemy and I'm not nearby, the skull will still spawn, the skull will still find nearby enemies, but it will not be following the person that summoned it because it's tied to me, and as I'm not around, it will just be standing still. So it can still be really helpful even if the person with the skill point isn't around, but it's not as good as actually having the skill. And I'm sure there are other skills that work similarly as well, where more people will benefit from it. So if you guys have any good suggestions on those, then I'm very keen to hear them. And with that, let's get into some tips from all of you. A handful of you have recommended refurbishing existing structures, basically. And that's also what I've done with my current base, which is not this one, but the tavern. I'm just going to show it up here because I've had a few comments asking where it is, but it's up in Revelwood, the Blue Goblet Tavern up here. For a reference, you spawn down here is where you spawn initially, so up here. So thank you so much to both Dark and to Corey Steiner 1218 and to Negative ROG. Dark has recommended that you can essentially take over a whole village as long as you expand your Flame Altar, which can be very helpful later on as you need more and more space. Corey Steiner is suggesting that you build your base somewhere high, and I think that's an excellent idea because then your base can essentially serve as an extra spire, an extra point you can travel out from with your glider. And Negative ROG is recommending the Necropolis, which I have not made it to, but the Necropolis is supposedly a really good area for having a lot of space. It's basically pre-built and it's very easy to move in. So yeah, thank you so much, all three of you. And Jack Brasher 8148 has recommended the combination of these two talents if you're playing a spell build. which is Bloodletting, which gives you a 50% chance on spell crit to spawn 2 health, mana, or stamina orbs, in combination with the good metabolism perk that increases the regen of orbs to 30% instead of 10%. It seems really, really strong. I tried it out earlier today, and I'm very excited to try it once I get more eternal spells. So yeah, thank you so much for that suggestion as well. Speaking of skill points, Negative ROG also suggested getting the jump attack perk because it's a 50% multiplier, plus it's an AoE, so you can kind of like jump in and ragdoll enemies. And with that, obviously also the jump attack too. If you're doing double jumps, it can deal even more damage with a 70% multiplier. And lastly, Festerod Gaming has pointed out that, as I was talking about in my previous video, it's cheap to reset your skills. It's not quite as cheap anymore because now it costs 1 rune per skill point you've spent, whereas before it just cost 10 runes. So it's a little more expensive now. I still think you should experiment a lot with your builds because it's still cheap, relatively speaking. But thank you so much for pointing that out. So that's going to be it for this video. Like always, consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Until next time.